8:03, and so we're going to get started. We are really excited today to have an amazing conversation about the state of our community. It's so timely that we're going to get to have a conversation about the state of our community as it relates to two things. One, Juneteenth, and the interesting history and the way that we feel about the last slaves being told that they were free in Galveston, Texas, on June 19th, and in what was that, 1855, I believe, um, to now, celebrating freedom, but also it's a reminder of the systematic oppression that would suggest that one wouldn't find out that they were free when freedom rang. And we're excited to have a phenomenal group of panelists whom I will introduce individually as we go through and after after we open in prayer. But as we do, we like to harken back to the history that we share here in America, and that most of our movements have been anchored in our spirituality, which we have found through Christ. And we hope that everybody, even if you are not a follower of Christ, you are respectful of this time as we talk to the Creator. And so with that, I would like to ask Bernie Edmonds, who is a board member and champion of SEAM in the community, who has been with us since the beginning, just asking, how can he help? I would ask if you could bring us in with a word of prayer.
Heavenly Father, we thank you once again for another day. This is the day that you have made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Lord, we have many things to come to you for. We ask you for healing in our land of the pandemic that is so devastating. We ask you for healing in our land for the injustices that is so devastating, Lord. We just love you right now. We praise you right now, and we thank you for being a God of salvation. We ask you right now for leadership, guidance. We ask you that we will walk in peace, that we will conquer in peace, Lord, and that our seed and our seed, our children and our children's children will be able to take this land and be truly free and help us, Lord, to grow as a community, to support each other, support one another, to be able to just have equality in this earth, Lord, to be able to walk together, black and white, and just make a change, Lord. We ask you right now to just touch and bless our hearts, give us the right things to do, the right formulas, touch and bless the webs for spawning this idea of this community movement. And Lord, movement means progression. Help us to progress and move forward with each step, each and every day. Each plan that we make, we ask you right now that you will touch and bless our plans, Lord, and allow us to achieve. We praise and thank you right now for Christ's sake. Amen.
Amen. Amen. And thank you so much, Bernie. You were channeling right there. Thank you. And so we've created SEAM, the Cooperative Economic Empowerment Movement, to increase access and opportunities for Black folks starting in the Inland Empire. And we do that in two ways. Way number one is we focus on wealth in the community. America is a capitalist country every single day. And there's only two types of capital, and Black folks are underrepresented in both. Those two types of capital are the ownership of land and the ownership of businesses. In the Inland Empire, we are actually more represented than across the board, or even in LA City, in terms of ownership of personal property, our own homes. While we're still underrepresented in the ownership of businesses, and those businesses are underrepresented in the total share of the economy that we represent. So we hope to change that so we have more representation in capitalism. Then on the other side, we focus on unity. And that's why we would like to have these types of conversations, because it allows us a space where we can come together and have a solution-oriented discussion about issues that impact our community. with people who are making an extraordinary change. As seen, we also are here to make an extraordinary change with the movers and shakers that are doing this in our community today. So these spaces today, previously, and moving forward, we are just so excited to be able to share with all of you. And so with that, I would like to thank our panelists. I would like to thank David Judah Oliver, Judah One, who is a poet laureate in the city of Pomona, for joining us today so we can have this awesome discussion on the state of our community and the state of public safety.
Hey, peace, family. Good morning. I hope that everybody is well, that the day finds you well, that Juneteenth finds you well, that you are finding some freedom and some liberty, despite the circumstances, despite what's going on in the world. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Right. All right. Cool. Good morning, brother. Brother Kyle.
Good morning, Judah One.
Brother Kyle.
I was also going to add, I've known Judah for a long time. I remember when he started LionLike Mind State in the city of Pomona, and then we moved to Chino, and it was weak because I was in the community in a real way. But it's awesome to see how that has morphed. And so to work in the school districts that you work in to help kids be able to galvanize their thoughts so that they have an outlet. One of the issues that we have, and we don't have an outlet, sometimes we don't know how to channel the rage that we feel. So I thank you for doing that in the communities here in the Inland Empire very specifically, but also doing that as an organization and as a leadership organization in that space, accessing our youth. So, man, I just appreciate you for who you are. Again, the LionLike Mind State, what you did with Machine and the shop in Pomona, where you showed people that, you know what, you might not have had anything to start with, but you can build something that has a lasting legacy. So, man, I appreciate you so much, and the family that you're growing.
Absolutely.
That's but yeah, man, I appreciate you so much, and I'm excited to hear. Again, David Judah Oliver goes by Judah One, the inaugural poet laureate of the city of Pomona.
Boom. Yo, thank you again. So I had a different poem prepared, but about 11 o'clock, I woke up from a nap and took a different direction. I finished this at 3:30 this morning, as is my custom the last 2 years. So this is where I am at mentally, spiritually at this exact moment. Here we go. Y'all ready? Shaking heads. I see shaking heads. All right, cool. It is time we took knowledge itself more seriously, with a double dose of wisdom, and with all the understanding we can muster. It is with a clearer view of history in which we see ourselves now. And just as the now, we know what time it is. Time for Black family, Black arts, and Black biz. Time to reclaim the stolen. Time to claim land some thought desolate. We'll make it golden. Could be now. Some just ain't holding it right. We have to keep it right and exact, especially when what we have right now is not. For us, it is still always like summer. It is always hot. My fingertips tend to sweat a bit when I see the cops. My heart drops for Floyd, Trayvon, and Tamir. My stomach drops for more because Zimmerman is still here. I want to slip into my lowest nature every time there is a new video, but no new charges, no at-larges, just further taxation without representation. How is it that you want my peace and deny my justice? Sandra didn't kill herself, and the 6th lynch last week didn't either. We chose to remember the 4th of July, the 4th of November, forget July, just as some remember how the Romans stole scriptures, forget your lies, just as some remember our middle passage to your colonies of liberty. Why is it still give us free? Where is our Lady Liberty? Where is our land and land grants? Didn't we work this ground? Didn't we till the soil? Were we not your first wealth? Are we not your first oil? Hey, yo, my blood boils. How many saviors shackled up in a hole with Mumia? How many mama messiahs had birth in bondage but didn't escape like Asada? When they ask me to sing a song, it won't be kumbaya. My tone more like Lord Kumbaya, with brimstone and fire and expire. Every judge sitting in injustice, and every lawyer ignoring the facts and law, and a melanated instance, and every cop that fabricated a flaw. Give them the full extent of the law, and then that'll make a better Juneteenth. Then I might see July 4th. Until then, I'll keep my mind to the east and my eye to the north. Peace. I'm Judah One, Port Laureate, California. Port Laureate, Pomona, California. Peace, team. I got to go back to work. I'm out here inspecting this water well installation out here in the city of Santa Clarita. For you guys that are joining the Pomona San Bernardino IE Power Drive Cruise IE, hopefully to see you in Pomona if I get out of here in time. You guys have a good day. Peace.
Judah One, appreciate you so much, man. That hit on so many different levels. Took us on a story.
And please look us up. My venue is called LionLike Mind State. I got that straight out the Old Testament, the LionLike heroes of Moab. LionLikeMindState.com. I make clothes, I make jewelry, I make all kind of stuff, and our venue will be back after COVID. Once again, peace. I'm Judah One.
Appreciate you, Judah. And again, we appreciate our awesome panel. Our panel includes today Avis Ridley-Thomas, Dr. Kirk Wilson, Damon Alexander, and Reverend Sam Casey. These folks are amazing thought leaders of our community who are fighting for awesome and phenomenal change, all in their own way and all pulling greater than their weight. And so we thank you for the work, and we thank you all for being here. First of those is Avis Ridley-Thomas, Executive Director and co-founder of the Institute for Nonviolence in Los Angeles and co-founder of Days of Dialogue. And so Avis Ridley-Thomas founded the Los Angeles City Attorney's Dispute Resolution Program in 1989 and served as director until retiring in March 2011. In 1984, Mrs. Ridley-Thomas, I call her Dr. Ridley-Thomas because she's really the one in the family, helped establish the Rosa Parks Sexual Assault Crisis Center. She was awarded the Healers of Conflict Award from the Southern California Mediation Association in 1994, the Rosa Parks Awards of Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1995, and the Phenomenal Woman Award from the Women's Studies Program of the California State University at Northridge in 1996. In 1998, the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund selected Dr. Ridley-Thomas as a Black Woman of Achievement recipient. The Los Angeles Daily Journal supplement recognizing the state's top neutrals, Ridley-Thomas was identified as a, quote, top neutral, end quote, among community mediation program providers. In 2009, the organization's Peace Over Violence awarded Ridley-Thomas the Humanitarian Award for Community Service. In honor of Black History Month in 2011, the Association of Black City Attorneys presented her the Unsung Hero Award. And she truly is an unsung hero in our community, just advocating on behalf of the proverbial us. And so with that, Dr. Avis Ridley-Thomas, thank you so much for joining us today.
And thank you very much for having me this morning. This is an honor on this Juneteenth to be a part of your day. I just want to say a few words about dispute resolution and how that became such a central part of my life's work. I am retired and I still do serve as executive director in my volunteer capacity for Days of Dialogue and the Institute for Nonviolence in Los Angeles. And I will talk about the latest initiative that we are pursuing in that capacity, the Days of Dialogue, Racism, Policing, the Pandemic, and Beyond. So we will be doing that, rolling that out very soon. But I'll tell you a little bit about my personal journey to dispute resolution. What I realized in doing work with victims of violent crimes is that there were opportunities for resolving disputes that were not being pursued formally. And as a result, we were seeing a lot of disputes or conflicts escalate to violence, especially in our community. And that was really undermining various pursuits, business pursuits, family stability, our community functioning the best that it could. And there really was no way to formally address those kinds of issues. So given then the opportunity in the office of the city attorney to draft the proposal responding to the California Dispute Resolution Programs Act of 1986, which provided each local jurisdiction, each county, the opportunity to raise civil filing fees in order to fund these programs. It was a matter of being at the right place at the right time and taking advantage of that opportunity for Los Angeles. So I'm certain that's the way that entrepreneurs see opportunities and pursue them. That is, it's here, I'm available to do this, I'm committed to this process, and let me invest myself in it. So over the years, we initially started training by the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service. And that institution was designed to help in labor management disputes so that commerce was not disrupted. And they came and trained. We ultimately had up to 2,000 community mediators to volunteer their time to help people resolve all types of disputes, non-criminal matters primarily. And this sometimes involved, by the way, entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial families and succession issues and probate and all kinds of family and neighborhood disputes. There's one index that I found very, very helpful, and I want to encourage you all to investigate. It is called the Colby-Conative Index, and that helped people understand their talent, their instinctive talent, and how that might be different one person from the next, and how we might be in conflict about how we pursue things, but how we could work together with our understanding of you pursuing things your way and me relying on my talents. We might do that very differently, but in trying to achieve the same goal, we can make our pursuit a much more productive one. So consider just looking into that. I had many of my students at UCLA, where I teach one class in dispute resolution, and they apply that in local schools. That Colby-Conative Index was considered, when I evaluated, really one of the very best things that was offered in that class. So I certainly encourage you all to investigate that. I'm sometimes called a social entrepreneur, and I accept that characterization. But it was really just the pursuit of those opportunities to help, especially members of our community, to resolve disputes constructively. So somebody wants the spelling of the index. It is at kolbe.com, and it's called the Colby-Conative Index A. That is the instrument that I'd like to recommend that you investigate. So after retirement, and I fully embrace retirement. I want you to know I am retired. And what that means to me is that I get to select those things that I just love to do anytime I love to do it. There is, nothing that no one else that I have to report to but me. I can, initiate anything at any time. I can get up early or stay up late, and it has no impact on what I have committed to doing, because I know that that's what I want to do this day. So this is a beautiful day, and this was a beautiful early morning pursuit of mine, and I thank you for asking me to participate in this process this morning. So I am currently, and I want to just tell you all about this Days of Dialogue. We started this in 1995. My husband at that time was a member of the LA City Council, and this was after the O.J. Simpson criminal trial and the Million Man March. You may recall the tensions after that period of time. And he called together our prophetic leaders in our community, the people who see hope when there is no hope. And they wanted a day of dialogue on race relations in 1995. So this is what I knew I could bring to that process. I had by that time trained 1,000 community mediators who were prepared to help people have that conversation about race relations. So in about a 2-week period, we gathered all of those people. We had 65 locations where you could sit down and discuss the challenges that were present and how you might work them out in your own way to resolve issues that were important to you related to race relations. So we're still doing that, the days of dialogue. And this most recent one, as soon as the crowds hit the streets, I knew I had to gather all of the facilitators and the mediators who knew how to help people to have a difficult conversation about the issues that we were facing. And they immediately came together as a steering committee. The ones who showed up banging at the door, they knew that Days of Dialogue was prepared to respond. And so they formed the steering committee. And of course, any recommendation they made, they were the chair of that committee to handle. So we quickly developed our discussion guide. We are now in the middle of our beta testing before we roll out. We've gotten a commitment from our fire department recently to look at training the whole Los Angeles City Fire Department. And we have our 900-person roster available to help ensure that these dialogue sessions are constructive ones. So, so as I conclude now, and I want to ensure that you all know that you have the opportunity to participate in dialogue sessions as well. We will do them virtually and in person, properly socially distanced, and keeping our health recommendations, adhering to them as well. So let me encourage you to consider the possibility of mediation in your businesses, in your family matters, and certainly in our community and societal issues. I always consider Days of Dialogue riot prevention. And I think that it can have a considerable impact on our quality of life. So let me now conclude with my time, and I will be around to answer any questions at the conclusion of the panel discussion. And I thank you again for having me this beautiful 2020 Juneteenth.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing your powerful experience in mediation and conflict resolution. You started making a point that so often there could have been another option that didn't lead to the adverse outcomes and could have rehabilitated someone. And it's really about that, the thoughtful nature of those types of discussions that bring us here today for the state of our community. So Avis Ridley-Thomas, thank you so much, and thank you so much for staying with us through the end. And for everybody who's here, and for the current panelists, I apologize I didn't address this at the top, but please use the chat box. We have a lot of people who have been commenting in there. Any questions you have for any of the panelists, please put in there, and we will direct those towards the end as we're having towards the end of the panel discussion, as we have time for questions. So again, please everyone use the chat box, and please put your questions in there. And for all of the panelists, we will be managing the chat box, and so we'll get to those questions as they come up. But again, Mrs. Ridley-Thomas, thank you. Thank you so much for everything that you've done in the community, and thank you for being with us and sharing your perspective today. Next, we have Dr. Kirk Wilson, Kurt Wilson, former Rialto City Council member, former city manager to Ridgecrest and Stockton. Dr. Kirk Wilson is a local government advocate, educator, and consultant. He's best known as a city manager who guided the city of Stockton through the municipal bankruptcy process and ultimately achieving the ranking of second most fiscally healthy large city in America. And he did all that while being the first Black city manager in the city of Stockton. The former Rialto City Council member and Mayor Pro Tem has also a public safety background that includes frontline managerial and regulatory oversight within local and state law enforcement agencies. As a researcher, his focus is on race and equity issues and includes a doctoral dissertation about the lived experience of policing Black America. With that, Dr. Kirk Wilson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. So I don't get to do a whole lot in the Inland Empire these days because I've sort of been so far away, but you know, that's still where we grew up. That's still where our family is. That's still where our loved ones are. So it's always great to be able to touch base with folks down in the IE. So for me, Juneteenth is something that until this year, I didn't see a whole lot of hype about. This year, I've seen a whole lot of hype. There's been a whole lot more interest, and I think it's really a timing issue, but I think it's something we can sort of take advantage of. So for me, Juneteenth isn't really about sort of the celebratory, that sort of thing. There's a lot of history that goes along with it, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that history. A lot of people went through an awful lot for us to be able to appreciate that history and to benefit from it. So we need
Dr. Wilson, mind if I interrupt just for a second? People are having issues hearing. It seems like it's a little like the microphone might be a little far away. I don't know if there's a way that you can increase the volume on your microphone. I also ask that everyone else, if you could increase the volume on your personal device, if you're listening on your phone or your computer, as he's transitioning to his headset. Dr. Wilson, thank you so much.
Give me one second. Let me get this to switch over.
I'm glad you're technical.
All right, how's this?
It's better, thank you.
Okay, and let me switch it on my end too so I can hear it out of there. Okay, so the whole concept of celebrating Juneteenth for me is really a chance not just to sort of preach to the choir. So there's a lot about our history that we already know. So those of us who follow our history, experience it, anybody who's sort of experienced the Black experience sort of is very familiar with what goes on and what's happened both today and yesterday. So we sort of get that. So Judah 1 described it saying, we know what time it is. So Juneteenth isn't really a chance to just tell us again, it's a chance to tell somebody else, because we have this conversation about social progress and trying to make some advances and going towards some things. We can't actually do that alone. So basically, in any public policy issue, in any social progress issue, we sort of got these two sides. We've got this side that says, hey, something's wrong, I want to fix it. And we've got this other side that says, hey, I like the way things are, I don't want to do it. And we have this fight, and we go back and forth, and we get creative, and we get angry, and we do all these things trying to sort of overpower the other side. But that's not the only option for how we can make progress. We've had a lot of examples in history where progress was made not by giving in, not by compromising on core values, but by getting other people in the fight. Because it's not just this group and this group. There's this whole middle group that's apathetic. They're not engaged. It doesn't affect them. Not my problem, not my issue. You guys work that out. When those people come off the sideline, that's when things change. Juneteenth is an opportunity for us to get those people off the sideline. Now, keep in mind, some of those people, just because they're not in the middle of the fight, doesn't mean they're bad people. It just doesn't affect them. They don't understand it. They're not sure what it is. They've never heard of it. They don't believe it. There are a lot of times in history where something has happened where people have become aware, and then that has helped to sort of turn the tide. We talk a lot about Rodney King. You know, the reason Rodney King was so significant wasn't just the incident that happened, because Black folks saw that and said, yeah, you know, that happened to so-and-so last year. Yeah, I've heard of that. I believe it. People who are not familiar with Blacks and Black culture said, oh my God, I can't believe that. Does that really happen? Is that true? That's what brought them off the sideline. When we look at the pictures from Emmett Till, that's one of those things in history that sort of sticks with us. Everybody sees that picture and remembers it and says, that's not what a little boy is supposed to look like. The reason we do that is because Mamie Till Mobley, his mother, decided she wanted to get people off the sideline. She wanted to get them in the game, and she wanted to force them to see what that actually looked like. So they couldn't just dismiss it and say, oh, it doesn't happen, it doesn't exist, that's not a problem, don't worry about all that stuff. So she tried to get people to publish it and saying, look, I want you to put this picture out there. And most people said no, until John Johnson said, yes, I will publish it, which is why that picture was published in Jet magazine. So it was the Black press that got that started, because the Black press is different than the white press, not in a bad way to the white press or to the mainstream press, but there's a different perspective. You know, there's a saying that until the lion learns to write, the story will always glorify the hunter. Even if the mainstream media tells exactly the same story, it doesn't tell it from the same perspective. Jet magazine publishing that picture, which then forced the other folks to publish that picture, brought a lot of people off the sidelines because they could no longer ignore it. They could no longer chalk it up to, oh, that's just, you know, they're just making stuff up. It's what got people there. That level of awareness brings people onto the sidelines. You know, we think, for most people who think of the civil rights movement, they think of Dr. King, and they think of the march, and think of some of those things. And when you look at particularly toward the second half of that movement who was involved, it wasn't just us. It was other people who had previously been on the sidelines, been disengaged, who weren't involved, and we got them on board. The same thing holds true today for where we are with going forward in progress with policing and how it goes. There's, you know, I have a lot of conversations about this, and I explain to people, I say, I don't know a single person who looks like me who has not experienced the ugly side of policing. Literally not a single one. But at the same time, while every Black person has experienced the bad side of policing, not every individual officer has engaged in or condoned that bad policing. And that's an important distinction, because it speaks to the difference between the institution of policing and the actions of the individual officers. We tend to conflate those two. And when we do, we end up using this broad brush to sort of try to fix all the problems. When we use that broad brush, we have people who do horrible things who get a pass because they get to sort of hide behind the good officers. They say, oh, we're all the same. No, it's okay, we're like them. And because we're taking this broad brush approach and we're basically stereotyping, you know, the same thing that we say, look, don't, you know, treat me as an individual. Don't treat me based on what the other guy did just because we're the same skin color. But if we take everybody and use that broad brush, then we allow the bad cops to hide behind the good cops, and they get underpunished. And in fact, the good ones get overpunished along with the same concept. And then we're frustrated because we're saying, look, nothing has changed. These bad guys are still out there. And they really are today, absolutely 100% still out there. We fight a lot about, you know, the percentages. Some people say, look, it's just a few bad apples. Most cops are great. There's one or two that are bad. Other people say, no, look, they're almost all bad. And we get hung up on that conversation, and it's difficult for us to move forward because we're busy fighting over quantifying the issue. But this issue is too important to focus on that upfront fight. We have to get past that fight, because even if it was only one cop in all of America who was bad and who did horrible things, that's one too many. This is a qualitative issue, not a quantitative issue. So it doesn't matter that we agree on whether it's 1% that are good or 1% that are bad. The fact is, we can all agree, no matter who you are, every cop I know can agree there are bad cops. And we should be doing everything we can do to fix exactly that situation. But it means we've got to get people off the sideline. Part of that is awareness. We've got to get those people who are sitting there, you know, it's not their issue. Hey, you know, somebody else will fix it. You know, maybe it's not that big a deal. We have to get those folks on board, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't alienate them. I hear a lot of people say, hey, we need good cops, or we need Black cops. And they'll go out and they'll march, and there'll be a Black cop out there. And when they're on that line, on the mobile field force line, it's the Black cop who gets berated the worst, who gets called the most outrageous things, who gets challenged the most. So they're saying, wait a minute, you told me you want a good cop, I'm a good cop. You told me you want a black cop, I'm a black cop. Why are you treating me that way? I'm actually on your side. The people who are in the middle ground are really the key to winning this whole thing. We can't afford to let up. So people who do bad things, who behave badly, should be punished. That's sort of the way it works. And when we don't punish them, things get worse. The way it is right now, in many cases, we are not punishing the bad behavior, but we're also not changing the institution. And those are two separate things. We have to change the bad institution, and we have to punish the bad officers. But we can't do it with the convenient broad brush approach of just, hey, let's just, apply this to everybody. We have to sort of get our hands dirty and get in there and figure those things out. Because if we don't, we're still going to allow those bad actors, and again, regardless of how many there are, we're going to allow those bad actors to continue to be the cancer that has plagued us throughout our lifetime, the lifetime of our parents, and going back and back. When we know our history, there's so many things that have happened that have not changed. And getting people off the line. When people saw the George Floyd video, and by the way, I had not seen it, and I tell people, it's not because I don't think it matters, not because I don't think it cares, but because from my own experiences, I don't have any reason to doubt it. I get what it means, and I feel like I've already seen it, even though I haven't seen the thing. Because for those who experienced it, this is deja vu all over again. We've been down this road. We've done exactly the same stuff. So we've got to get to a place where we're making some progress, and we have to sort of pick a course. I think the strength we have is the middle ground. There are a lot of people in the middle ground, a lot of non-Blacks who are just sort of living their life, doing their thing, who can be real allies in this movement, in this process, as we work our way toward progress. And it's frustrating that it's taken this long, but that's just sort of the hand we're dealt with. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to make improvement in this area, and I think we absolutely have to make improvement in this area.
Amen, Dr. Wilson, and thank you so much. That perspective of how to move it forward in light of politics is extraordinary, because so often we try to get all the way to the end, but really you're going to get to the compromise. And how do you get to the first step in change or how do you get to the last step in change if you don't first get to the first step in the change, right? And so I just thank you so much for your perspective there. We have a lot of good questions, and so I hope that you'll stay with us as well through the end. And as we as the other presenters have presented, then we'll get to the Q&A portion. So again, thank you so much for your perspective there. Our next panelist is Damon Alexander, a candidate for the San Bernardino City Council, 7th Ward. He served our country for 29 years as a United States federal agent and has since retired. Damon is a current member and the former chairman of the San Bernardino's Commission of Public Safety. He also serves on the city's Veterans Committee. Mr. Alexander was selected as Veteran of the Year honoree in 2011 by Assemblywoman Amina Carter, and was again honored as Veteran of the Year in 2018 for community works. Mr. Alexander is a graduate of the prestigious Harvard's Leadership Institute, and he is married with a blended family of 5. And so, no further ado, Damon Alexander, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kyle, and I would just like to thank Mr. Webb, and those who invited me and Seam for the good work that you guys do. I appreciate that. This is my call to action. I'm a very call to action type individual. So without further ado, Rich, if you can put on the presentation so we can move forward. So what police reform looks like. As we said before, I'm a call to action. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is what police reform looks like after 29 years of federal law enforcement and working with various agencies all across the country. We can talk, but I'm about do. And the only way we can change and make my fellow law enforcement officers change the way they police is through reforms and state legislation. Rich, next. You can read that for yourself. We're not about defunding, because you can't defund the police. You can't dismantle it or nor abolish it. We would go and we would be in chaos if we did any of that. You can restructure and you can reappropriate funds, but you can't abolish the police. Next. First things first, this is what we call qualified immunity. This what protects my fellow law enforcement officers, me included. This, when we do something wrong or when we do something and it's questionable, qualified immunity is what protects us. It's the legal doctrine of the United States federal law that shields us from when we perform our duties. And every time we do something, and you wonder why, when something goes wrong, you say, God, how did that person get away with that? You know, that was excessive force, or they did that. Why can't I get to them? It's called qualified immunity. And it's in every state, including our state and the state of California. So to hold our officers more accountable to their actions, we have to peel back qualified immunity. This is what you won't see on television, ladies and gentlemen. This is what you'll see, what I call window dressing, when they say, oh, okay, we're going to eliminate chokeholds. And I heard Governor Newsom say, we're going to eliminate chokeholds, and I quote him, because they're of no use now. Well, as a person who was in charge of use of force from my agency, when was chokeholds ever good? So now you're just saying they're not good now? Listen to the words. Words matter. This is the number one. That's why it's number one on my 8-point presentation, is you have to peel back qualified immunity, because if there are no repercussions for the actions that you take, then I will continue to do what I do. It's like if you break the lamp and you don't ever get in trouble for breaking the lamp, I will continue to break the lamp. Next. This is what I call law enforcement's 3 strikes. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. 3 strikes, you're out. Any law enforcement officer in the state of California that falls under the peace officer status, that has 3 sustained use of force actions against them, sustained, you shall not allow to be a sworn officer in the state of California anymore. This would be legislation. You have to have some consequence of what happens if you have that. The officer in Minnesota had 17 complaints against him, and I don't know how many were sustained. But if anything after 3, you don't need to work anymore, because you have a systemic problem. And also, if the law enforcement officer has found unlawful use of force resulting in the loss of life, you're not eligible to work in the state of California at all. There has to be some action regarding that. Next. Use of force and use of force databases. I always hear I heard some, he said, we can't get a use of force database. It's hard to track use of force database. That's malarkey. If they know the number of points that you get on your driver's license every time you get in an accident, they darn well sure and able to track use of force complaints in the United States, and or by city, county, or state. It's doable and it's easy. All you have to do is report it. And you got to do it by ethnicity as well, because then we can find out through Freedom of Information Acts what agencies are actually doing things good, because it's not always bad. I'm not always a negative Nancy. What agencies are doing things good and what agencies need some improvement. And the only way you can do that is by tracking the data. And that's the way we do it. And this is an easy way to do this. Track the data. Next. Amend a law. Again, I'm always about legislation. Amend this law 148.5. This law concerns false reporting. Now, I don't want to call it the Karen law or whatever kind of law you want to call it, whatever one you want to call it, but it's about false reporting. Law enforcement agencies, when there's a false report, you never heard about the person who called in the false report getting into trouble or getting arrested or getting a citation. Well, you know what? Maybe we should do that. And maybe when they do it like the one in New York, like that lady, Miss Cooper, did in New York against his last name is Cooper too, no relation. When she made that call and falsely reported what she did, if she made it in California, that'd be a violation of this penal code. And then I'm there to say, let's amend it to say if it's about ethnicity, because we know our ethnicity is used as a weapon. So let's put in there and let's amend it to where say ethnicity is in there and a $5,000 fine. We had a saying in my agency, if I can't arrest you, I'll make you broke. I'll take all your money. So if I can't arrest you, I'll fine you to death. Every time you call in and you do not do the right thing, there has to be repercussions for people calling in on us or anybody, but specifically us, and there's no repercussions. There has to be repercussions. Next. The establishment of police and sheriff's commissions. And as Kyle said before, I'm former chairman of my police commission in the city of San Bernardino, and there has to be some sort of oversight. Trust me when I say law enforcement agencies do not want civilian oversight at hand. And if they do, it's powerless, it's toothless. It doesn't have any power to do anything. It's window dressing, as I say. The creation of, I believe we have one in San Bernardino County, but if they do not have the power or the teeth to say this use of force or this agency has too many use of force issues or complaints, we need to look into it and have the power to say, you know what, we need to change direction. Not that they're experts, but they are looking at it from a civilian point of view. That needs to be created and done on every level. Cities have this power. That's why your city councilmen are very important, that you talk to them on that particular issue. We need to establish, they need to have authority. Where does your money go on these police commissions? Police are, I'm sure, 50% of everyone's city budget, at least 50% of everybody's city budget. Where does that money go? How's it, are they using it for the youth or some type of program? Yes, there are youth programs in our city police department. You have to establish commissions with civilian oversight of some proportion, because that keeps everybody honest. And that's all we want, is to keep everybody honest. And it has to be written in so that the sheriff or the police chief has to respond to you. Next. Protesting. This is the little history. I always like to usually start my presentations with a little history lesson, but this is, it touched me with everything that's going on, and it reminded me of Nat Turner. As I was reviewing Nat Turner, his 1831 rebellion, I was looking up for more information, and the Nat Turner rebellion in 1831 killed 51 of our European cousins during that time. But you have to ask, why did he do what he did? He was tired of the oppression. He was tired of slavery. He was tired of being treated wrong. He was tired of his women being raped, so on and so on. We all know the atrocities that happened. But as my mother said, he was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and he rebelled. Words matter. This is the Aubrey Floyd rebellion. Why? Because we are sick and tired of being sick and tired. Aubrey, the Ahmaud Aubrey murder is, in my opinion, way worse than the Floyd, because it was civilians that tracked him, ran him down, got in a truck, and then murdered that individual. It was civilians that covered up the murder for almost 2 months. So when civilians do it, it's much worse than the police. So we must be careful about the words we use. Protests, civilian, riots. No, in my humble opinion, this was a rebellion because of the oppression. This was a rebellion because we're tired and tired and tired. So I always coined it the Aubrey Floyd Rebellion of 2020. Next. California fatal shooting policy. This is, again, legislation. Whereas when a fatal shooting happens in a department, that said department always investigates its own shooting. There's no transparency there when my buddy in internal affairs is going to investigate my own shooting. It should be where if I was a fatal shooting, another agency should look in and investigate that shooting, i.e. the sheriff's department of that particular county, or a federal agency if that's not possible. That will curtail the possibilities of cover up and provide more transparency of that particular shooting. Next. Recruitment. I've heard recruitment all the time. I recruited when I was with ATF. They always say, you know what, we can't find anybody, qualified individuals. I heard that all the time during my years with ATF. And I said, where did you look? I said, we have over 90 HBCUs with people with degrees, because you need a degree to get my job. Just to get in the door, you need a degree. And they said, well, we can't find anybody. Well, actually, they're not looking, because if they look, they'll find. So, but like I always say, diversity is a strength, and we need to have people that look like us in particular agencies from the federal level, which I was on, all the way down to the local level. You have to have that, because I see something that my European counterparts don't see. I understand my culture a little bit better than my European cultures don't see. And I have a zillion stories that we don't have time for to share with you about that, how diversity makes a department stronger. It actually does. Next. Dash cameras and personal cameras. This is the Mr. Brooks shooting, and how dash cameras and personal cameras show and tell the story versus a written report. We need dash cameras and personal cameras. Next. This is my 8th and final point. Dash cameras, body cameras for all local law enforcement agencies. It's not a request, it's mandatory. We must have that. We must be able to see and hear everything that goes on with interactions, because not all cops lie, but enough of them do to change the situation to their favor. So to weed out that, to keep everybody honest, because if you're doing the right thing if I'm doing the right thing as a law enforcement officer, I don't have any issues with a body cam or a dash cam. I should have no issue, because I'm doing the right thing. When you get pushback as, well, why do I need that? Well, if you're doing the right thing, you don't have no problem with that. And it protects the police, and it protects the civilian population as well when it comes to interaction. It will curtail unwanted lawsuits and complaints. And that's where I stand. These are call to actions. These are the 8 points. It requires state and local legislators. I have sent this out to various congressmen and senators. I need everybody to push this out. That's where I stand. We need to, I love protests, but legislation changes things, how we do policing. And next, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, everybody, for coming aboard. And everybody have a great day. I'm going to stay on at the end if anyone has any other questions.
Thank you so much, future Councilman Alexander. 8 points, 8 awesome points that really drive to the not just the narrative, but to the solution of the narrative. And so thank you so much. I think there's so much there, and then there's been so much here in the chat, and I'm using my hand to identify the chat on the right side of my screen. But there's just so much here going on in the chat, questions and clarifications that people want. So we're really excited, and really for everybody to participate in those conversations, because there's a conversation about mediation that should certainly be had around a conversation around public safety reform and how we can get real, honest, and authentic public safety reform. So we're really excited about. We thank you for your contribution and everything that you're doing for and with us, and we're excited for the Q&A portion to come.
Thank you.
And so our final person who's been so gracious to join us this morning is Reverend Samuel Casey. He's a senior pastor and co-founder of New Life Christian Church in Fontana and executive director of Congregations Organized for Prophetic Engagement, COPE. COPE's call is to galvanize the collective of more than 5,000 congregants throughout the Inland Empire to revitalize the communities in which they live, work, and worship. For the past 3 years, COPE has been leading a coalition to reform criminal justice called Rethink Public Safety, and recently led the coalition to push San Bernardino County to declare racism a public health crisis. Pastor Casey has over 15 years of experience organizing faith leaders to engage in grassroots organizing efforts focused on education, prisoner reentry, and consumer advocacy. Pastor Casey formerly led an empowerment program serving more than 500 at-risk youth in San Bernardino City Unified School District. Pastor Casey, thank you so much for joining us, and we're excited for your perspective.
Thank you so much, Kyle, and to your father, Mr. Webb, and to this entire August body Juneteenth celebration day to each and every one of you. Super excited to be in this space and trying to stay, I guess, in the lane, in the vein that I've been asked to speak. But hearing the three previous speakers, powerful. To Dr. Ridley-Thomas, did some work with her husband when I was attending a congregation in Watts, California. Just a stalwart and a staple within our community when I used to live in Los Angeles. This year, COPE celebrates 20 years of work within the Inland Valley or the Inland Empire, San Bernardino and Riverside County, really to transform and revitalize our communities through direct grassroots organizing, rooted within our faith. Dr. Thomas mentioned earlier about prophetically speaking. We believe our work is rooted in the prophetic text and tradition of the African-American faith tradition that from time to time seems to be lost. I want to start by saying this as we get to the work that we've done within the last 2 weeks to not ask, but demand and push San Bernardino County to declare racism a public health crisis and where we stand today. Based on some of the things we've even heard earlier, I want to quote something from a book that I encourage all of us to read if you haven't read it before. Lockdown America is the name of the book, Policing in the Age of Crisis. And Mr. H.R. Heddleman, who was in the office working alongside Richard Nixon, said back in the 70s, and I quote, "You have to face the fact that the whole problem is really the blacks. The key is to devise a system that recognizes this while not appearing to it. And the reality is, since the early 70s, really after slavery, after Jim Crow Black codes, and the Freedom March up into the 60s, and even to where we are presently, California in particular, but really across the nation, has been on one of the largest prison expansion projects for a long time. Michelle Alexander will call it the new Jim Crow, or the new slave movement, or in camping, bringing slaves together again. This is an important time for us as we face these challenges. And the reason we forced San Bernardino County to declare racism a public health crisis is because, you don't need me to do the data and the stats. Our health is at risk. And we can say their names. Physiologically, sociologically, mentally, our health is at risk. Our health is at risk even around this pandemic of COVID-19, but has been at risk from the pandemic of racism. And this come Tuesday, June 23rd, San Bernardino County is not only going to declare racism a public health crisis, but once the information becomes public, they are also including within that declaring public health racism a public health crisis, an 11th group to the vision of the county. There are 10 element groups that they call in the county that are working on the county-wide vision from cradle to career. The 11th group is going to be called Equity and Access. And all of the 10 element groups will now be worked through or filtered through the lens of equity and access. There are some major teeth in the declaration that includes law enforcement. Mr. Alexander would love to get a copy of that report that you've just presented, because those are some of the topics that we'll be taking to the law and justice table in San Bernardino County to begin to discuss not only reforms in law enforcement, but reforms in education, in healthcare, in employment, in hiring, in business practices, and how the county is even facilitating and disseminating contracts and the access of not people of color, because we must say Black, because there is an anti-Black sentiment that is rising. So even for us, I just spoke with the top 15 foundation leaders in California, from the endowment to Irvine to wellness to Weingart. And I shared with them that they even must move from not just being non-racist, but to being anti-racist, which means that when you see something, you actually say something. And so this process that we're engaging in the county is helping the county, and even us sometimes, understand that when we get in spaces where we need to lift the Black agenda, it's okay to say Black. And we don't have to say people of color, because when we say people of color, we invite everyone else into the process. And not that we shouldn't, but when the Black tide is lifted, the reality is all tides are lifted. And so when we begin this work with the county in the coming days, it's going to be important that we continue to lift our Black voices in spaces of diversity, because the reality is, if we don't speak for ourselves, and if we don't continue to name for ourselves and claim for ourselves and reimagine for ourselves and be self-determined in this time and in this era, and capitalize not only on the moment, but this is a movement for us where we actually have an opportunity to change laws, to enact some things that we've been trying to accomplish for years. And namely because we have allies, I believe, who are not only, we're not only sick and tired, I'm personally Black and tired. And there are those who are also seeing the injustices that they just cannot stand to see anymore. And I agree with Damon Alexander. This is another uprising and a moment where we get to dial in history and lean in such a way that we get an opportunity to really change the trajectory of this county and ultimately of this region and really this state. But it's going to take a collective effort of all of us lifting our voices to not only challenge law enforcement, but to challenge even the electorate that look like us sometimes. Not only must we challenge them, but we also must support them. I have personally made it our organization's motto and mine's personally. I will never fight a Black electorate official in public. But I think we also need to learn how to call them to the carpet in private and have a family meeting when they're not courageously standing up and lifting up Black issues. And we must support them with the outside, inside game and begin to elevate this platform of declaring racism a public health crisis. So even if there are any city officials on this Zoom watching today, we need to move it to every city within the county. It's being moved in Redlands on July the 7th. We're looking to move it to the city of Fontana, Rialto, Rancho Cucamonga, especially the cities within our county and region that has the highest amount of African Americans within their cities, because this is the time where we're actually going to see change, but we must stay at the table. And let me close by saying this. On June 25th at 5 p.m., as part of declaring racism a public health crisis, the Rethink Public Safety Coalition, which is made up of social justice organizations, direct service providers, and families, who are really challenging the narrative around how we do public safety in this community. And the way we do that is by presenting initiatives that are restorative, redemptive, and responsible in nature as we shift how we do public safety in this community, county and state and cities, and the cities. Here's the reality. I'm also part of the Community Commission. I'll come back to June 25th at 5 p.m. in a moment. That's my closing point. As part of the DA's Community Commission, June 19th in 2019, he shared with us all of the criminal data and cases that have been filed from January 1 to June 19th of 2019. And the reality is there were over 31,000 cases that were filed. Only 19 of them were received. 13,000 of them were misdemeanors. Only 4,600 of them, give or take a few numbers, were felonies. Out of those 4,600 felonies, only about 500 of them were violent felonies, non-Prop 47, non-Prop or AB 109 candidates, but most of them were general felonies, meaning DUI, domestic violence, and a few other items. So the community is not as unsafe. And listen, for us as Black people, do not buy into the narrative. It's the modern day slave camp when we buy into the narrative of our communities being unsafe or being violent. And although there are some instances in the communities that we live in, but here's the opportunity for us to reform criminal justice, because crime and violent crime has actually been on the decline. Here's our moment. June 25th at 5 p.m., we have a virtual town hall meeting with the district attorney of San Bernardino County, the sheriff of San Bernardino County, and the public defender to begin to change the narrative and challenge them on the narrative of rethinking public safety here in the county of San Bernardino. I close by saying this. This is not the first time we've been here as a people. We were here back in the early 90s when I first started this organizing, and this year COPE will celebrate 20 years. We've been here before with Prop 187. At the time it was AB 209 and 3 strikes laws. Let's not be pulled into the wrong narrative again. Because when 3 strikes laws was passed, it was overwhelmingly passed by people who look like us. That's why we must rethink public safety at this time and buy into ACA 5, which is to repeal what's taken place with 209 or affirmative action. Thank you so much for your time and inviting me into this sacred space. Make sure you vote, make sure you participate in the census, and most importantly, help us to rethink public safety in this county. Tuesday, June 23rd the County Board of Supervisors will enact the declaration and resolution. And then June 25th, we will host a virtual town hall meeting with the top law officials in the County of San Bernardino. God bless you.
Pastor Casey, thank you so much. That's so powerful. And it's also a pleasure that we get to work with you. The leadership that you and COPE shows is absolutely phenomenal. And you have a track record of driving significant results on behalf of the community. And in the same way that you're talking towards a result driven, right? Leading a charge about getting this, about getting racism declared a public health crisis, because in all reality, that's what it is, especially for those of us on the other side. And we talking about Black issues, right? One of the reasons that I think that we get a positive response in the racism thing, though, is that we do have allies who in the rest of America are also a minority, but here, not as much. So they experience some of the similar things that we do. We have to talk about these things from a Black perspective so that our perspective is not lost, but it's the allies coming together that enable us to have an authentic conversation about making change. And it's got to happen for Black folks. And so we just appreciate you so much for everything that you are doing in action on behalf of the proverbial us. So thank you. And thank you to all of the panelists. I mean, this has been just a phenomenal set of presentations in perspective. I'm really excited to get to the Q&A. But before we get to the Q&A, I have a couple of things. Thing number one is that we're seeing the Cooperative Economic Empowerment Movement. We ask for anyone who is on the call today who has not checked us out, please do so at ceem.coop. We exist to provide two things that I said on the top. Access and opportunities for Black folks. And it starts with wealth and unity. This is part of our unity programming, right? Also, working with organizations like HOPE, we want to be a space where we can create that family environment. We don't want to do what COPE is doing. COPE is doing a great job on the advocacy front. And we also need a space where all of us can get together and have a conversation about our strategy as a family, where we ain't gonna let anybody shame any of us outside of the family. But when we come in, we have to have real, honest dialogue about the things that impact our community and have spaces like this where we can share it. On the wealth side, we've developed a membership cooperative so that for $100, you can join SEAM and your money will go towards creating businesses that are owned by the community. Not by me, not by my family, not by any of of our board members. No, we have the same one share that any other member gets. So when the businesses that we create work, they are working for the proverbial us, not working for any of the individuals at the top. So again, we ask that everybody goes to seem.coop, CEEM.COOP. And it's also in the chat quite a few times, and we'll continue to say that. We also wanted to, I wanted to ask our founder, Reggie Webb, if he wouldn't mind addressing the group for just a few moments prior to us getting into the Q&A portion.
Thank you, Kyle. And thanks to our panelists. This has just been extraordinary to listen to all of you, to what you are doing, to your perspective on the issues of the day and the direction that we must take as a community. We have a thing that we say in McDonald's that comes from Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. And I think it underlies the success of McDonald's Corporation. And it says, none of us is as good as all of us. None of us is as good as all of us. The one thing that we have in our community is we have tons of organizations and individuals, some of whom you've heard on this call today, that have been doing the work that has caused our community to progress over the years. Many, like Moses crying out in the wilderness, have stayed persistent and consistent, no matter what, through all seasons. What we have not had is consistent, continuous unity, where all of us are in agreement on some issues that all of us are supporting and bringing our resources, our contacts to the table, our influence to the table in every area of endeavor that we are engaged in to move those issues forward. That's the distinction of seeing. We are not in competition with anybody within our community. We are in cooperation with everybody in our community that is moving issues forward. That is not to say that we agree with every aspect of everything that everybody that's moving an issue forward. That is to say that we find ways to be in agreement with each other so that we do not depart from each other. And that is by moving forward on those things that 80% of us or more agree on. That way we all stay at the table together. We all continue to move together, not just for this day, but for all days, not just for this generation, but for all future generations to come. That's the model that will allow us to accelerate the trajectory of change that all of us desire. And let me just say this last aspect. Middle-class African-American children really are doing well. Low-income African-American children are doing bad to Lord have mercy. If we do not change the economic condition of our community, the intractable problems that we have will remain intractable. We represent almost 8% of the population in the Inland Empire. We have less than 1/10 of 1% of the business revenue. If that number was approximate to our percentage of the population, we would be a wealthy community. We would not have 25 to 30% of our community being impoverished. That is the specific priority of the cooperative economic empowerment movement. We are structuring ourselves and growing that structure every day to address the broader issues of our community, but to focus on the economic issue that underlies all of the problems within our community. Join us. Thank you.
That was dope. That was awesome. Thank you. So now we'll head to the Q&A portion. A lot of these questions are directed at individuals, and primarily because the questions came up during their presentations. But we ask that any of the panelists who would like to address any question or perspective or portion of any question, please dive in after we address it to the person who it is titled to. Pastor Casey, how do we ensure that the foot stays on the pedal, that these efforts do not become a flavor of the month?
Absolutely. Typically what happens in moments like these, we all get excited, angered, and then we all go back to business as usual. What needs to happen and what's going to happen, at least from Cope's perspective and mine's personally, is we're going to stay in their face. I've committed myself to being at a county board of supervisors meeting now at least once a month, not only to hear how they're enacting the process of establishing the 11th element group, but also so that they can see us as a fixture within this community at the legislative body within the county. But also, those of you who are in this process, you must continue to engage in your spheres of influence. You must become a part. I'm always recruiting for COPE, volunteers, intellectual to come to the table. We've got to stay at the table. You know, I think an excellent question. And sometimes my feelings get hurt when people are asking what's being done. And I'm like, look, we've been around for 20 years. We just need folks to come and be a part of it, and don't wait for the next person to be choked out or the next Ahmaud Arbery to be chased down. We welcome you to come to the table. There are several tables we have: Rethink Public Safety, Black Equity Coalition that's focusing on education and jobs and economics. So there are tables for people to join and participate at. And listen, I don't care who get the credit. Stay at the table.
Thank you, Pastor Casey. Do any of the other panelists would you like to address that? How do we keep the foot on the gas for these kinds of conversations and to drive results?
I do think, this is Avis Ridley-Thomas, and I do think that we have to consider self-care as well.
Yes,
For
ma'am.
example, COVID-19 has impacted us disproportionately. All kinds of physical ills are impacting our ability to participate, our ability to live a fulfilled, empowered life. And so focusing on the care of our physical bodies, our spiritual pursuits, our mental health, those are things that are important to be able to fully stay on the gas and make your best contribution in life. So a little tagline on our days of dialogue is self-care to social action. So we say days of dialogue, racism, policing, the pandemic and beyond, from self-care to social action. We couldn't put that whole title in our materials, but that's what we recognize that is important. So whatever we could do to ensure that we are well taken care of, we can improve the possibility of staying on the gas as effectively as we can.
Wonderful, that's powerful. All right. Also, Mrs. Ridley-Thomas, do you mind saying again the name of the index?
The Colby Conative Index. So I did put it in the chat room as well. And that's at KOLBE.com. And that's the Colby A. What I really appreciate about this index is that it has been demonstrated over and over again how it is an unbiased instrument. That is, all of us have talent. It demonstrates your particular talent and the instinctive ways that you do things. What is helpful in a conflict resolution is that it demonstrates how people, in doing things just the way they naturally do, can be in conflict, but by understanding the different approaches, you can appreciate the contribution that another person can make. So in 3 of the 4 modes, my husband and I are in conflict in the way that we approach things, but this 40-year marriage has been a productive one, and information about those approaches has been very helpful to us over the years, knowing that he's going to see it one way and I'm going to see it another way and start our work. We have now learned that that's okay, that we are that different, but it is very helpful to understand and be able to see those differences. So when my daughter-in-law came into the environment, I asked her to please take it so that we could appreciate one another's different approaches. When people work for us, or when I start in different interactions where we are going to be doing things together, I often ask people to take it, our contractors and whatnot, just so that I can see how they approach things and we can have a conversation about that. Whether or not we're in conflict, I can actually just see how they're likely to approach a given situation. So I hope that you all take advantage of the index demonstrating those strengths that all of us have and those talents that sometimes are so different from one another that we really think the other person is like doing things that just intentionally get on our nerves, or that we may be perceived as undermining others, and they're really just the way a person goes about their lives. So I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely, it is. And I'm gonna be a little selfish. And you were talking about marriage and the 40 years that you celebrated. I also want to just take this moment. My parents were married on Juneteenth 39 years ago, or 49 years ago. Let me get that right. 49 years ago today. And so I would just like to congratulate Reggie and Renee Webb on their wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
49 years. Conflict resolution. That is the thing. When I was looking to get married, my dad told me, what's the difference between like, how'd you get to this far? And he said, you just stay married. And as a part of that, you have to resolve those conflicts. You know, the things can't get too large between you. And the earlier you do it, right, the more proactive you are about doing it, the easier they become to overcome. So Dad, I thank you for your example, and Mrs. Ridley-Thomas, to you as well. And to everybody, I would like to ask, how can people get involved with your organizations? Ms. Ridley-Thomas, the question to you is, can you provide information on how people can become a mediator with your team?
Well, I'm going to type in our websites. We have 3 at this point: daysofdialogue.org, INVLA.org, and futureofpolicing.org. We're trying to integrate those as we speak. We should go live with the integration next week. But there are so many ways to be involved with us. And the latest Days of Dialogue that I referenced, I'm going to put that in the chat box as well. But we really appreciate, we rely on our volunteers. And our roster is now about 900 at the Institute for Nonviolence in Los Angeles. And we are broadening our scope because all of us are now virtual. And so we are beginning to work with various platforms so that we can roll out the latest Days of Dialogue, Racism, Policing, the Pandemic, and Beyond with Cisco WebEx as partners, so that we can really go throughout the nation if people wish to engage in that dialogue. So I'll be placing that information in the in the chat room for people to be able to contact us. And our website, our email address, daysofdialogue@invla.org as well. So I hope that that's helpful.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
Future Councilman?
Well, I put in the chat site where to reach me, Damon Alexander, citycouncil.com. If you guys want to get involved. You mentioned about getting involved. It's always, always, always. I have a saying that my kids, they repeat stuff after me after a while. Silence is complicity. Silence is complicity if you don't take action of some sort. If we walk around and do absolutely nothing, your silence is complicity to what's going on, in my humble opinion. If you can't email, it's not even writing letters anymore. My wife belongs to Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and they used to have a day of writing your legislator. One day, they all got together and they wrote their legislator, whatever topic they were asking about. So now, to me, I have an 8-point plan. Everybody has an 8-point plan. is to take that 8-point plan, if you agree with it. You know, if you agree with it, you can't have too much, because you have too much, then again, it gets all foggy. But if you take that plan and you just email it, I mean, I emailed this to at least 10 legislators in 10 minutes because it was cut and paste. It took more time to find their email addresses. It took more time to find their email addresses to email them. And then the state legislators only limit you how much you can send. So I couldn't get my whole 8-point plan in because it was too much information. So, you know, that's how we, in my humble opinion, that's how we move forward and being silent. If you can't march or you can't give money, but everybody here is on the internet, you can email them if you agree with the plan. You say, hey, you know what? We need to do this particular part. Take the part that you like and move that part forward, and ask for follow-up. Because what we do, and I love Sam Casey and what he says, and I follow up on that, brother, we need follow-up. If I can create a follow-up commission to follow up what happens to people after we get all rah, hey, let's do this. But can anybody here tell me what happens to officers after the initial, everybody's mad? Did they get convicted? Did they not get convicted? What's the status afterwards? Because I'm coming from a law enforcement perspective. They judge me about how many people I put in prison. So that's convictions. We should be on the same boat. How many people actually got put in prison? Thank you for arresting them. That's a step forward. But are there convictions and taken away of their freedom for possibly taking away somebody's life? So back to how you can get involved. That's how you can get involved. I have a quick question that someone asked me, protesting versus rioting. Once again, words matter. Words matter. When certain segment of population does something, it's called protesting. When we do something, it's called rioting. So I always go back to the Sons of Liberty. I don't know if you guys know who the Sons of Liberty are. Those are the folks that went in there in the Tea Party, dumped the tea in the harbor, and they were called patriots because we were the victors. What would you call them today? If you went on somebody's boat, trespassed, grabbed their tea, and threw it in the harbor, you would be called a terrorist if you were on the losing side. Always remember, the winning side writes the history. The winning side writes the history. So, Ms. Poole, protesting versus rioting. We're protesting. This is a rebellion. This is not a protest, because we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And as Sam says, sick and tired of being black. Or I'm sorry, Sam, I'm not quoting you quite right, but you get what I'm trying to say. Help me out.
Black and tired.
Thank you, brother.
Sick and tired while being black. Thank you so much for those awesome comments. It really hits the nail on the head. And Pastor Casey's still muted, so I think, did you want to answer that question again?
No, quite simply. I've put it in the chat several times. Go to our website and fill out one of the connection cards. You'll get automatic updates to our meetings and our engagements, specifically for Rethink Public Safety. Text RTPS to 84576, and you'll get automatic updates as to the happenings of Rethink Public Safety.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Dr. Wilson, this one is specifically directed at you, but again, we'll ask everybody to participate. Attorneys have an ethical and professional duty to report unethical actions by other lawyers in order to protect the public. Why don't cops have the same requirement? Along with that question, how do we hold bad cops accountable when they have collective protection?
So for the first piece, lawyers are they have this unified body. So they're just state by state, the bar, you kind of go through this process. So it's very unified. So you essentially are able to apply the same rules to everybody. Law enforcement, there are different rules. So there's the legislative piece. So if you're in California, for example, you've got, in addition to the federal laws, you've got the state laws, and then you've got your policies and procedures within your department, and those vary. So in many places, that actually is the requirement, that you must go forward and do that. So if I go out, you know, if I'm in uniform and I go out and fail to report, I'm actually in trouble with my agency, because that's the expectation within my agency. That's not the expectation within every agency. So I know there are some efforts to go forward with some legislation that would sort of unify that. But right now it's on a case-by-case basis. But again, remember, depending on the culture of the agency, that's going to determine how closely practice is to what's actually on paper. So there are going to be some agencies where that's what's written on paper is thou shalt, you know, A, B, and C. But if the culture of that agency doesn't require that, that's not actually going to happen. Which is really to the second point of how do you hold bad cops accountable? You've got to do it in a uniform way. It can't be hit and miss. It can't be that when this incident happens on this day with a person who looks like this, the result is different than the same circumstances when it happens at a different time. If we don't have consistency, just like parenting, if you don't have consistency, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good. I saw some folks, including my father-in-law, in the chat talking about how the need to show up at some of the meetings regularly. You can't be hit and miss. You've got to have that continuity. Same concept when it comes to that discipline. It's got to be fair, but it's got to be even, and it's got to be consistent. It can't be different when it's my buddy, when it's my friend, when, oh, but he's such a nice guy. It's got to be consistent across the board.
Would any of the other panelists like to address that question or those two questions?
I'll tag on. I think the final piece is, or in addition to what was just said, by Brother Wilson, I believe it is, we have an opportunity with what we're doing in San Bernardino County to push for some of these commissions, but it has to be a sustained effort. The reality is the work that I'm benefiting from is from the work that started in the 60s. I don't expect none of the changes that I'm working for to see in my lifetime. I'm working, maybe one or two I hope to see, but I'm working to see the change that's going to come from my unborn grandchildren and this next generation of leaders that's coming up. So part of it is pushing for the consistency, but also even being able to get at the table. That's why brothers like Damon Alexander is so important. I did not know the information that he just presented. Some of it I've heard before, but this is key information that we must take to the decision makers as a collective, along with our allies. And now is the moment in time.
Awesome. Thank you, Pastor Casey. And also thank you, Dr. Wilson. Both of your answers are truly phenomenal. And then, you know, it takes perspective, right? There's one thing about, you know, the things that we want to support in a community. It's something else to get the action done that's going to achieve the result in practice. And it's really about the practice, right? We got to get the laws, but we got to get the practice much more so than we got to get the laws. But they work hand in hand oh so often. So thank you both for that perspective. Leisha Smith just posted in the comments that the San Bernardino County's Board of Supervisor meeting is Tuesday the 23rd, as Pastor Casey mentioned, at 10 a.m. At 10 a.m. And I believe it's available telephonically as well via Zoom or some other sort of a streaming device for those who can't.
Could I say something, Brother Kyle?
Please.
Shout out to Leisha Smith. She probably doesn't want to be recognized or the credit, but she's been key in seeing that racism is being declared a public health crisis in San Bernardino County. So I've got to shout you out, Leisha. You and Dan Flores. Thank you, sis. And thank you for always being a stalwart and a champion in this community, not only out front, but also behind the scenes. So thank you so much.
Amen. Amen. Next question. This one is specifically addressed to Damon Alexander. Regarding the use of force database, how do you get around union protection in contracts? And are there studies that track the number of police officers tied to white supremacist groups?
None that I know of. White supremacist groups changes. The FBI holds a database on what we call white extremists. I hope you guys know that they have a database on Black extremists now, and a Black extremist could be us. Literally, that's how vague the definition of a Black extremist. If we were all here preaching cooperative economics like you guys are doing, Mr. Webb, all the Webb family, it is so vague that we could all be considered Black extremists just for preaching lift each other up. And I'm not kidding, because I don't kid. That's how serious what we're dealing with here. So no on that particular question. And could you tell me your first part of your first question again, please?
Regarding the use of force database, how do you get around union protection in contracts?
Okay, use of force database, you're right. They're called POAs, Police Officers Associations. And in fact, I'm in negotiation with one right now, mine in San Bernardino City. It's difficult because they're protected of their officers. And I understand that. But at some point, protection of your officers and protection of the community, which comes first? We're looking for information for the protection of the community. And if an officer has a systemic problem, then the police commission, which I mentioned earlier, needs to know stuff about that. And so does the public, to protect the public. That officer in Minnesota should have never been on the force at all with that many use of force complaints. At some point, you have to say, enough is enough. This officer needs to be dismissed or put behind a desk where he can't hurt anyone any longer. So it's difficult. It's not impossible, Kyle. It's just difficult. You just have to continue to negotiate.
If I might add just a little bit, we were working for many years to try and ensure that people who felt that they were even treated rudely by an officer could mediate that dispute with an officer. They eventually did, when I left, establish a police mediation program. So mediation is voluntary on everyone's part, but just think what would happen if a chief saw 15 mediation requests just because you treated somebody rudely as they saw it when you interacted with them. That begins to show that there is some kind of issue going on with a person who can't do their job and simply treat people respectfully in doing that. So I always thought that if we had something in place institutionally to give people the opportunity to have redress at lower levels, they might not ever get to the point where they are injuring or killing someone. That doesn't come out of nowhere. There is some behaviors that happen beforehand on a much lower level that may be able to be addressed if we have the process in place to get that behavior addressed at a lower level. And that's what I advocate as well. These people who are being killed, there were, I'm certain, years and years of behaviors that somebody could have just raised their hand to say, this is not acceptable to me. I deserve better than that. And I want to have a conversation about how you even thought that you should approach me, another human being, in that manner. That really might begin to discourage the behavior from escalating and really so negatively impacting our entire community.
And that's correct, Ms. Ridley-Thomas. And that's why point 8 is body cams, car cams. That ceases all doubt. So when you have your remediation, when someone makes a complaint, all we gotta say is pull the footage.
What happens if they have turned off the cam?
Body cams, car cams automatically run. See, and car cams automatically run. Body cams you have to turn on. Car cams automatically run. So when you get out the car, you initiate a stop, it's running. That's why I push car cams as well as body cams. It took me a minute to get San Bernardino City, and I was on them forever to get the body cams. My next step is get the car cams.
Awesome. So in addition, Dr. Ridley-Thomas posed a thought that's really at the heart of another question that's in the chat. What are your thoughts on reforms around dispatch and leveraging other health and safety officials for matters that don't require armed police?
Well, I always thought that based on the provisions of the California Dispute Resolution Programs Act of 1986, that we should have a mediator on every block. And what happened, unfortunately, in the Inland Empire is that your judges there locally tried to lock up the funding that they were able to receive, and the state had to go down and meet. I remember trying not to have to sue your county, but to meet over and over again to tell them, these funds that you are raising through increasing your civil filing fees are to be used for community-oriented conflict resolution programs. So it's laid out, and the requirements to recruit and train community volunteers to use public space to do that, to conduct sessions in a particular way. It's right there in the Dispute Resolution Programs Act of 1986. So I'm going to encourage the participants here to look at that. And there are so many ways that you can now approach whatever kinds of issues you encounter without, by the way, we provided services in the city attorney's office without charge. Most of the programs do that, but some of them are on, what do they call that? Income related, where you evaluate excuse me, sliding scale. And that's what the state law provides for. So I'm really going to encourage you all to look into your resources in the Inland Empire. The judges, unfortunately, there saw it as an opportunity to enrich themselves. So they tried to lock it down, the resources available, but the act is still in effect, and you do have redress to do that. And I think as people are calling for defunding of the police, that the police will be amenable to having such programs available using those resources that they have been provided by our municipalities.
Awesome, thank you. And Dr. Wilson, same question to you, if you would.
So, and the idea of should police go out on the full range of calls, short answer is no. But I think it's sort of important to sort of take a look at how that came to be. So you have government structures that were set up for specific things. So speaking as a city manager, I've got to perform these things, so we haven't divided up. I've got a public works group that handles this stuff, and engineers do this, and you kind of do all that stuff. So they know what to handle within their area. They're all set and they're all good. Every once in a while, something comes up and you say, well, that's new. I'm not really sure what to do with it. So in most cases, what happened is you said, well, I don't really know. So, well, just give it to the cops. So not have them prepared to go do it and trained and know what they're doing and resourced and everything else. Just, hey, let's just give it to them. We do the same thing with some of our fire folks as well, but we sort of dumped everything onto them, and they were never designed for it. They were never prepared for it. So they do end up going on a lot of things that don't make a lot of sense. How do you sort of draw that line between what that is? I think that's a little bit more nuanced. I think some of the things that start off very simple and basic and harmless end up being much more significant. And a lot of that has to do with that, that 911 caller, like some of you've talked about earlier there. But yes, there are a lot of things that we ask of people that don't make sense and are not going to lead to good outcomes because they're not designed, they're not trained, they're not recruited, they're not prepared to handle some of those things.
Thank you for that perspective. Future Councilman, would you like to answer that question as well?
Mr. Wilson, Dr. Wilson, he's absolutely correct. When I used to go out on calls, you know, and right before I retired, we were getting training on PTSD, how to deal with PTSD issues. Law enforcement officers, like he said, we get thrown into everything and try to solve all the ills of society, and that's just not the case. We're just not prepared for that. And or what public safety, even fire. That's how law enforcement agencies and public safety agencies have grown, because who do we give it to? Let's give it to police. Let's give it to fire. We have to find some balance, as like Kirk said, we have to find some balance. Honestly, I don't know what that is. That's a situation where, you know, those at a higher pay grade is going to have to figure it out. But we can't keep piling on our public safety officials and expect them to do and be and end all to everything. It's not possible.
Thank you for that perspective. Pastor Casey, I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in on that as well. All right. We have time essentially for one more question, and we would, I ask that everybody limits your time so we don't run over. We only have 4 minutes left from which we've asked for people. But you know, we talk about public safety, and we're also often talking about policing. But I also wanted to get to this question about domestic violence. And the question was really posed by Jendai about creating a safe environment for people suffering from domestic violence. How do we have a thoughtful conversation around public safety from that perspective, where we might be creating more harm in the household for someone that calls 911 and a police officer is sent in that environment, whereas, you know, if we were sending a mediator with a police officer backup who doesn't come into the house unless required, might present a more suitable response, if you will. But I would like to ask you all if you could provide some perspective there.
We were fortunate in the city attorney's office to have had a very close relationships with the domestic violence unit. And we understood that while we did not mediate violence, we could, that is, we're not going to negotiate with you about, you know, whether or not you can harm somebody some of the time. We can do things such as help ensure that people are safe physically by using law enforcement to accompany people, for example, to get any items out of a shared home. But again, working with individuals to resolve problems along the way that then escalate to physical violence was always an approach that we took. Even with children, sometimes the biggest challenge was that the parents really didn't necessarily want to hear what the children had to say, saying that their opinion really wasn't that important in whatever decisions were made in the household. And the children sometimes were just very, very effective negotiators for their particular approach. So we have to be open to the possibility in a household of listening to all of the members of that household and beginning to work out problems constructively, showing them how. Because some people have come from very violent situations, and that is simply the way that they know how to do things. What mediation was able to offer was a process for doing things more constructively in your family, in your business, in your organizations, and with involving community volunteers who were not a part of your business. That is, you didn't know them, they had no conflict of interest, their interest was in helping you to resolve the dispute. That seemed to help in such situations.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. Would any of the other panelists like to address that?
Yeah, it's the mindset. If you want a mediator to come into a domestic violence situation, first of all, let me tell you this: my fellow law enforcement officers, domestic violence is the second leading reason why officers die. First being traffic accidents, second being domestic violence. That's the second leading reason why officers die in the field. So sending a civilian in, to me, is we have to change the mindset of the public at hand, because when we have an issue and we call 911, we expect somebody with a badge and a uniform to come to our door. And part of the time, some of the time, if we're trained, if it's a good officer and they're trained to de-escalate a situation, through body language, through voice tones, and all the other things that they taught us, then possibly we can bring in a civilian after the situation has calmed down a bit. But right now, the way our mindsets, and I don't know about Ms. Ridley-Thomas and what you guys do there. I worked in Los Angeles for 20 years and area else around the country. Domestic violence is a touchy situation to bring a civilian in. It's touchy depending on, like you said, the violence in the home. And we have to be careful where we're going to bring in a civilian in the situation. That's all. We just have to be careful.
Yes. There was a comment in the chat that says, if somebody's escalated and there's a domestic violence situation going on, someone sees a gun, it creates fear, which has the potential to escalate more violence. Also, in a previous one of these that we held, someone brought up the point that social workers, for example, are more disproportionately reflective of the communities that police are sent to police. And so if you have a scenario where social workers are really a part of the public safety apparatus, you might be able to get better results. You might not, I don't know, but it's a great place to have a discussion. Thank you so much for everyone being on the call. Thank you so much to the four of you for being amazing panelists and providing phenomenal perspective. It's been great. Thank you. And I also thank Judah One. I thank Cheryl Brown for helping to organize. I thank Amy and Serenity and Rich for also helping to organize and really getting this thing pulled together so we can have to create this awesome space. It's Juneteenth. This is the time for celebration, and we are celebrating the changes that we get to make, because that's the awesome part about being in this space. We get to be the change that we are creating in our world and for our world. So thank you so much for being that. Our next one of these meetings will be July 30th, again in the morning, probably at 8 a.m., probably on Zoom, as we still are, we're seeing another spike in new cases. We're no longer going the same direction. So, for us as a group that is more impacted negatively by the spread of COVID-19, we know we have to take care. So we're going to take care and maintain our social distance longer than how people would suggest, so that we are not negatively impacting our own folks. So we'll have another one of these on July 30th. For any of you who are panelists and would like to stay, we normally create an open forum after this so people can ask questions and we can have conversations about either SEAM or any of these conversations. There are a lot of questions that we didn't get to for time. But for everybody who's a participant on the call, again, we ask that if you would like, you can stay and we can continue to engage in this conversation amongst us all. For that, again, this is SEAM. You can check us out and join at ceem.coop, seam.coop. And for those of you who have your renewals, please get back to us and renew. We're an organization that is a membership co-op, and we need membership dollars in order to do the things in the community that we are here to do. So for that, we thank you. We thank all of the panelists. And as we do, we would like to end acknowledging the Creator for what He's done for and with us. So Linda Jackson, if you wouldn't mind.
You hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. Thank you.
There's a lot being said, everyone, and this takes more than just a prayer. It takes the Holy Spirit to come in and to help. So I hope you don't mind if I just read one little thing to you so that you can take this away, because there were so many issues, and we have to understand that our source is God. That's where our help comes from. So to God be the glory. There is one God and one mediator who can reconcile God and humanity, the man Christ Jesus. He gave his life to purchase freedom for everyone. And that's 1 Timothy 2:5-6. I want you to take that with you, because we can't do it without God. We have to go to God first for everything. We have to get on our knees to be united. God brought us together to be united. So it's going to take all of us. But the first thing that we must do is that we must cry out to God, and we must beg God and to ask Him to help us do what you all have said. There has never been a time such as this that God has revealed to us that He closed the churches to bring our butts home so He could get our attention. So go to God for those answers. Don't go to man. Don't go to anyone. Seek God first. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. I love you all. In Jesus' name we pray. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Thank you right now. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.